Namaste everyone, my name is Vaishali Shah. I welcome each one of you to our session on Hindu culture and lifestyle. You're watching us live on hinduscriptures.com Facebook page, and you will also get to see this video on YouTube channel Hindu Scriptures. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our Instagram page, Hindu Scriptures 1. Those who don't know about the book series, it's this interview series started because I wanted to promote the things which I've written in the book. In actually, there are three books: Hindu culture and lifestyle, in three parts, and these books are available on various websites on Amazon and Flipkart. So those who have not thought of grabbing a copy, please do it because we are running some discount sort of things. So today we have an interesting speaker, Keshav Fulbrook ji from the US. Keshav ji, namaste.
Namaste ji. Very good to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, Keshav ji, we have this tradition of starting our session with a small prayer. So I would like to request you to chant one shloka, whichever of your choice, please.
Will do. Thank you, Vaishali ji. Om Guru Brahma Guru Vishnu Guru Devo Maheshwaraha Guru Sakshat Param Brahma Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Om Gangurubhyo Namaha. Om Gajananam Ganapatim Gunanam Alayam Param Tam Devam Girijasunam Bandeham Amrachitam. Om Ganganapate Namaha. Om Saraswati Namastubhyam Varade Kamarupini Vidyarambham Karishyami Siddhir Bhavatu Me Sada. Om Sam Saraswati Namaha. Om Namaha.
Thank you so much, Keshav ji. It is so wonderful to hear this wonderful prayer, a small prayer from someone like you who's not been brought up into this culture. So before we start our session, I would like to read out a small introduction to our audience so that they know a little bit more about you. Keshav Fulbrook is an American Hindu who has pursued Dharmic studies for upwards of 10 years and whose background is primarily in Advait Vedanta. He has visited India on a Hindi language fellowship and speaks Hindi while also learning Tamil and Malayalam pleasantly. So, Keshavji, please tell us something about your childhood. How did you start and why did you think of learning Hindi and your journey into Sanatana Dharma?
Sure. So probably when I was about right around age 13 was when I had first gotten exposed to some concepts from Sanatana Dharma. At the time, I didn't recognize how impactful these things would be later on down the road, though. Most of my exposure was from kind of more like Western New Age authors, and they pulled from a number of different traditions. They would pull some things from Buddhism, Sanatana Dharma, and obviously the two are, extremely, extremely closely related, and other traditions as well. And one thing that I noticed through that is that some of the things that stood out to me as most profound credited a Hindu author. So, they were traditional. They're from Shastras, they're from Bhagavad-Gita, they were from Yoga Sutras and things. So after that, my interest began to develop more.
So what exactly have you studied? What is your background in your degree or whatever you are studying?
Sure. So right now, so I started college a bit late. I started when I was about 24, and I was working before that. I was technical support for DirecTV, and then I moved in. I went to college and am earning my degree in political science, so I'll be graduating this May. Focus on international relations, kind of hoping to move into like embassy related stuff, but at the same time I'd like to find a way to try and tie my dharmic interest into the career field that I ultimately choose, perhaps be able to settle down in Bharat for longer term, but we'll see.
That is very interesting. So have you got initiated by any particular guru? What is your philosophical background? What is your specialization in studies? Which scriptures you like the most?
Yes, definitely. So when I had first started out, I had studied primarily through Kauai's Shaiva Siddhanta organization. So they kind of have a background in like Tamil Shaiva tradition, and that's also kind of where my interest in like Tamil and the language and Sanskriti and things also occurred, in addition with like wanting to learn Hindi and all of this. And then, but I don't, my background had always mainly been in Advaita Vedanta. Like those were really the teachings that initially pulled me. And so began studying with teachers who were affiliated with Arsha Vidya Gurukulam under Swami Dayananda Saraswati ji. So when I was in India in 2018, received Diksha from Swami Brahmaparananda Saraswati ji, and he was affiliated with the Arsha Vidya Sampradaya there, and then also did Upanayanam in Rishikesh through Swami Dayananda Ashram there as well.
So interesting.
And as far as
sorry, yeah.
Oh no, to answer the shastras that really pulled me. So originally it was Bhagavad-Gita. There was a very good friend of mine who was here in Missoula, Montana, which is where I've been since I was about 15 or so, who began teaching the Gita here. And that was when I first got exposed to it.
That's very interesting, because even I've got my lessons of Vedantas in Dayanandji's ashram in Rishikesh. And in his presence, I was really fortunate to have met him and learned things from him. So I think you are my guru brother then.
Wonderful. Great. Glad to hear.
I'm sure you know what is guru brother, right?
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. Guru, would he be Guru Didi? I don't think that's a term, but that might be.
They use. Yeah, Guru Bhai and Guru Bhen, as in, if they have gone to the same guru. And yes, I was really fortunate to have met him, because Dayanandji's knowledge and his work and it is still influencing lots of people all across the world. So since you have studied Bhagavad Gita, tell us something about a few points which you have liked the most, and how those things can relate to this world, and what can you basically share your knowledge. What kind of points? I mean, I want you to inspire our listeners to go back to Bhagavad Gita, study that to resolve any modern day problems. So give us some ideas about that.
Absolutely. So right now, I'm going. So I'm in the midst of going through Swami Dayanandaji's his 9-volume home study that it became available on Amazon and several other platforms about a year and a half ago, if I'm not mistaken. It was available in print before then, but on the Amazon and stuff, it became very, very affordable online. And that's just an absolute treasure trove, because I'd been through Gita multiple times, through different sources and with some different teachers, but the level of clarity, just like you say, that he's able to shed on it has been something just very much something else. Something that was very impactful for me at several points in my life. So when I was about 20 years old, there were lots of tons of upheavals and really serious life events, car accidents and hospital visits, and lost the place that I was staying. Like there was quite a bit going on. And it, I was at a point where I was so overwhelmed that I felt that I couldn't act at all. I mean, it very much felt like the Arjuna's, Vishada yoga, that point where, he casts down his arms and he says, I can't go any further. I may as well give up right here on the battlefield. And, I very much felt it's difficult to explain because it's very subjective, but I remembered those verses from the Gita that basically say that, no matter what sort of obstacles that you're facing, you have to get up, you have to fight, you have to go forward, and to do the best that you can with what you have, the best way that you know how. I mean, it was one thing to sort of have heard those words before, but to really see, because I was so worried about the results of my actions. If I try to do, this, that, or the other thing, will it be successful? What's the use of even trying? And it's like, don't worry about the success, just do the actions. Karmanyevadhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana. You only have control over your actions and not of the fruit. So I think that that's something that to this day I really try to live up to on a daily basis.
So you have experienced that Bhagavad Gita can resolve our problems, our everyday problems, modern problems, urban problems. So it's so wonderful to know. Now tell us something about what are you studying? Like, as you said, you have taken up the course. What is the purpose and what are you studying there?
Mm-hmm. So with that, Swami Dayananda Ji's works as well. In addition, there is, sorry, I think there's a phone going off in the background. I apologize. But in addition to that, I'm very interested in the Kerala sampradaya of like the puja paddhatis and the things like the Keraliya tantra and things. And there's classes that are offered online by a teacher, Jitesh Satyanji, who offers his Sri Vidya courses to anyone who shows severe dedication to it. So also studying that, I have a strong interest in a Purohitam, and I have done the best that I can with the resources on my own for learning all sorts of various pujas and things. And also I'm looking into courses when I'm there. I know that certain organizations like Chinmaya Mission, they have courses based out of Coimbatore. Also, I think in or near Mumbai, if I'm not mistaken, for Paurohityam classes and things. So look forward to trying to pursue that more.
It's very interesting to know that you want to be a Purohit. You think so you will be able to perform puja? There are so many disciplines which is required to be, and I believe that you have to follow those principles to become a Purohit.
Absolutely, yes. And I do strive daily. I do Sandhya Vandanam. And ever since Upanayanam, and try to be as consistent with that as possible. If for any reason life throws things, curveballs my way, minimum Gayatri Japam, but try to be as consistent with all of that as possible. But I feel time will tell, but I feel like it's a commitment that I may be able to make. So we'll give it a shot.
Very interesting. So have you always been vegetarian or you turned vegetarian after this?
Yes, so I turned vegetarian after roughly age 18 or so. And at first it was difficult because I didn't know how to go about doing it the correct way. And then I started getting into cooking, in a more kind of like Bharatiya style. And that's the thing is, it's all about, the spices that you use, the ingredients that you use and things like that transform the food that you're using. There's a whole science behind it. Whereas, I mean, no offense to American cuisine, it's just a little bit harder without having a little extra background and, broadening those horizons to be able to figure it out. So it took some time, but, I feel like I have a good balance now compared to before.
Okay, so how about your family background? Because I'm now wondering, are they in a state of shock? Have they accepted you? I mean, what is their views about all these things? Because I did not expect you to tell me all this. I thought you would have just studied the scriptures and you are promoting it, because I've been reading your post and I know, I mean, what you write and all. I mean, so now I'm keen to know about your family background as well.
Sure. Fortunately, very supportive, everyone. And, couldn't have asked for better support. Already there's within our family, many different people from many different backgrounds, and I myself. So when I was growing up, so I'd kind of been in a couple of different households with the different members of my family growing up, and each person, they kind of had, there's a different faith tradition, slightly different faith tradition followed in each one of those houses. So there's people in my family, and mainly there are denominations of Christianity. But there are people in my family who are Catholics, and people who are Mormons, and people who are Protestant, and people who were Buddhist at one point in their life, and things like that. And so I was exposed to a lot of different ways of going about things growing up, and then had the freedom to be able to pursue and explore what became very, very meaningful to me. So I feel very grateful and blessed to have had that opportunity.
So, what is your goal? What do you want to do after studying so much? Because you will still have to earn your livelihood and you will still have to support family once you get married. So, how will you do that?
Yes, so as it is right now, like kind of the goal of what I'd been working towards was looking into doing embassy work, things like that, with the U.S. Department of State, as perhaps a foreign service officer, things of that nature. Studying for those tests, it's a very, very rigorous process. It's very competitive, so we'll see how that goes. But beyond that, there's many other avenues that I'm looking into and pursuing. Language studies, a big focus of mine. So like I'd mentioned, so I'd studied Hindi for about 4 saal ho gaye. It was for about 4 years or so. And then Tamil is the current focus, and I'll be studying that for an additional year this upcoming 12 months. And Malayalam will be I will be done soon. But what I hope to do with that, I think that will open up some doors to being able to pursue the foreign service officer thing or other positions. And the backup plan for everything is psychology. It was my original career track that I was looking into, was clinical psychology. So if all else fails, we'll still be looking into that. So
Dharmo Rakshati Rakshitaha, you understand, right? So once you are out there to protect Dharma, I'm sure Dharma will protect you. So I'm very sure that you will be placed and you will be settled in the place and in the job the way you want to. You're mute, you're mute. Keshav
oh
ji, yeah.
yes, okay,
So
yeah.
I mean, I'm a bit curious to know that since you have studied all these things, how much it is important for you to learn language. You could have studied scriptures in English also. So tell us the difference between studying Hindu scriptures in native language compared to English.
So obviously Sanskritam is the best to study. And I have been and I have been focusing on that, but definitely the conversational languages I ended up taking more of a focus on. But Sanskritam for sure is needs the highest level and most dedicated commitment to get to. But really there are different nuances that there's concepts. My friends, for example, will get very frustrated with me because there's certain concepts when I'm trying to explain these things that you almost can't get away from using Sanskritam, or at the very least another
Maybe Hindi.
conversational language, Hindi, exactly, Tamil, things like that. different senses are conveyed. There's a whole universe of meaning that will be associated with a specific word and how it's put together that won't be there in English. And it takes a lot more work to be able to get that whole constellation of nuanced meaning behind the English word. Fortunately, there's a lot of phenomenal teachers who do a very good job at taking a term in Sanskritam, like we were talking about Swami Dayanandaji, taking a word in Sanskritam and really elaborating in English, these are all of the shades of meaning associated with this word, and this is how it fits in to this verse here. But so I think that there's such a wealth of understanding that can come from those root languages, that it's worthwhile to pursue.
I remember once you were told, and a couple of times, that people were questioning about your existence, that whether you are really there or not, because you were writing so much pro India. So how do you defend yourself, and how do you counter those who are trolling you at the same time? I'm sure there are many people who are criticizing you. How do you manage them? What is your argument?
Sure. So, it's at one time, there was a time that I used to allow some of the things to maybe get to me a little bit more, but I don't think that that the motivations that people have for trying to cut someone down often have more to do with them than they have to do with you, and that's really what I've seen is there have even been weird, and I won't go too far into this, but occasionally there's been a professor to, like, people who've had these sort of like higher positions and who've targeted me personally for some of these things, and it has less to do with me than perhaps their own complexes or insecurities. And it's not that people will project all sorts of images onto you that may not have anything to do with you as a person at all. So they're usually fighting these ghosts in their head that they're projecting onto you that have little to do with who you are. But beyond that, I think that Satyameva Jayate. In the end, I try to be as honest as I can with everything that I'm doing, with my intentions involved with everything. If I see something a certain way, to say it as I see it, and if that's aligned with the truth, that will become evident in time. And if it isn't, then I need to be corrected. So I think that just having an allegiance to the truth solves the rest of the problem.
So then your critics are from India or from your people around you? I mean, where are they from?
There have been both. They have been. It's been an international thing, equal opportunity in that way. But there's so little of it, and especially now that I think that I don't focus on it near as much, because I feel like there's so much more important things. Whenever someone is working to build something up, I'm sure, like, you yourself must have experience where it's like, so you have a successful platform and you're working to build things up, and there's people that just may not like that for whatever reason, but there's no use in worrying about that, because they're not building anything themselves.
I wanted to ask you this is because I wanted to understand, have you observed the difference between Indian value system and the Western world? Because now you know both the sides quite well. I want you to inspire our youth, especially the youngsters and the parents, because they're running, especially in India, they're running after education in the Western world, and they're paying through their nose for the fees, and they think that is the end of the world, and that is the only way they can find the job for them or they can secure. So give us some idea and inspire them. What do you think about it?
Sure. So I have seen this as well, and I think that what may have happened in the West, particularly, and it's a path. So I'll say that there's nothing wrong with being driven and being conscientious and going after things that will secure a better future for oneself. But I think that in the West it became a thing where it's like, that was all that there was for some, not for all. But I've noticed, and especially, so like, say I'm in Bharat and things like that, and I'll be explaining all these things that I'm interested in and particularly related to Dharma and things, and then and I see this sort of almost cognitive dissonance where it's like, yes, but how do you feed yourself? And it's like, well, you can do both. It's one can be interested in these things and then also have, and it need not be impractical, so like we alluded to earlier, these the way that I see it, a philosophy, and I don't want to use the word philosophy because it's a little too, but so like the teachings of Dharma and things like that, it's the software of culture. It's the seed from which the things that we do sprout. One of the greatest forms of wealth is meaning, and I feel that there's a crisis in the West due to a loss of meaning. A lot of people, particularly of my generation and the generation who came just after mine, are experiencing this crisis of not feeling that there's any sort of cohesive direction or coherent meaning of life. And outside of just maybe acquisition of things, acquisition of money, acquisition of stuff, and they go after and they get more stuff and they get more things, and then they wonder why they're still not happy. And I see that a lot. And it becomes a vicious cycle. And I think that people are looking for more. And I think that the teachings that I've been exposed to offer more. And I think that it's something that, that's why it's something that I'm so passionate about talking about and promoting.
That is very interesting. So basically, you agree that people who are running after having the degrees in the Western world are maybe very rich materialistically, and they are doing extremely well in the US. But the new youth, the young, the new generation, the coming generation, they are getting lost because they think if that is not happening to them, then it is the end of the life. And that is what I'm worried about. But now, since you know the both the sides, you tell us something about what have you observed in India, because I want you to inspire the non-Hindu and non-Indians that if they want to come to India, what all they should do and how we can have that this bridge built between us and those who are hesitant to come to India to study or even to holiday or whatever, or maybe religious tourism, if you want to promote that.
Absolutely, yes. And I definitely think that that sort of right, that religious and spiritual, that tourism is a burgeoning thing in Bharat. I think that most of the people who I've spoken to from my town here who have gone, they've gone for the express reason of, that's what pulls them, that's what draws them. And I think that that's something that's going to continue to grow over time. And in order to inspire people, I think that the more people, because for myself, for example, it's difficult for me to even explain. It's just, it is my favorite place to be. I'm trying to get back there. If everything works out, it looks like probably by September, so that will become a reality. But it's I think that when people see other people being excited about it and saying that this was transformational for myself, this is something that I'm going to keep pursuing over and over and over again, I think that it opens that sort of window into their heart and mind about doing the same. And I think that the narrative surrounding it, because and it's interesting, and I know, so certain people, I know that people like Rajiv Malhotra and some of the speakers that he's had on as well, and things have mentioned this about like the relevance of the Indian history and identity to the Americas. And it's like America itself was founded by people who were looking for India. That's the whole point was, it was what we have today was a search for that initially. And so the two stories are interestingly intertwined. And of course, there's a lot that happened in between. But I think that making that connection, and people are beginning to, particularly with that search for meaning that I was talking about earlier, view Bharat as the place to help bridge that.
It is so very inspiring for me also to understand that you have changed your name from, I think, to Keshav. And in India, people are looking to have names from the Western world and some weird names, some Kia, Tia, Mia, something, and where there is no meaning. And I see you changing your name from something else to Keshav, and which is the name of Krishna. So, I mean, what inspired you to change your name? I'm so happy to, to know that you're so much on the right track. You're under 30 and you're so much on the right track, which I don't see in Indians, especially in bigger cities in Bombay or Mumbai, Delhi. Not so much, not that much clarity is there about dharma. So why did you change?
Thank you. Yeah. So when I was about, I think I was about 22, 23, I requested a namakarana samskara. I went back to, so I was born originally in Las Vegas, and I was visiting Las Vegas again during that time, visiting family down there. And I had requested namakarana from the local temple there. And so they had performed, and many dharmic institutions kind of stress this, particularly if you're coming to Sanatana Dharma from a non-Sanatani background. They strongly recommend this, and it was a step that I wanted to take personally. And I know that, so like you mentioned, particularly in Bharat, like you'll run into many people who will have and many times for religious reasons, but now also, like you mentioned, it isn't necessarily even related to that. Like it's more just sort of a trend or a style or things. And so I figured I would go the other direction. And and not everyone understands it, for sure. Very, very, very few do. And when I'm in Bharat, there are definitely, it leads to very surprised reactions. And not everyone, particularly people of my age and age group, particularly not everyone know exactly what to think about it. But generally, it's always positive, and it also, people start to think about it as well. That relationship between the name and the identity and the connection to something bigger and more than oneself, in a history and tradition and things. So yeah.
Yeah, there are two reasons. First is the one who speaks, who calls out your name, and secondly, the one who's the listener. So in both the, in earlier times, our names were always about gods like Ramchandra or Krishna Raj or whichever. I'm just giving you some vague examples. But there used to be our, gods into the names, because then that many times we are, chanting that names, and it was so much meaningful, because when someone who's hearing it and someone who's calling, both the people, it was a kind of blessing. But today's generation is completely out of that, and they just don't understand. Have you seen your horoscope? Do you know what is your horoscope and Rashi?
Yes, yes. Tula Rashi, Vrishchik Lagna, Vishaka Nakshatra.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
yeah, I actually, I very much, I have a love of Jyotish Shastra. It's something that, and while, I haven't studied it in a systematic way, from a single guru within a guru parampara, that's something that I hope to do. But it is something that I have very much looked into, and particularly, Brihat Parashara Hora Shastra, and the standard sort of shastras surrounding it. So yeah.
So interesting. So you know where the astrology also comes from. Of course, it comes from Parashar Rishi, where he has written this Parashar Granth. So your life itself is very inspiring. I mean, that is the reason I thought of having you, because I really want, just by your action, your Rashi, your horoscope, your name, your initiation is done. Um, do you know? I mean, I wanted to know, how do you write your Gotra? What is your teacher's or your guru's, thought about this?
Yes, yes. So initially, so before the Upanayanam, when asked, I had always said Kashyapa Gotra, because the general rule was that anyone who, if there's an Ajnata Gotra, it's Kashyapa Gotra. Now, so after the Upanayanam, on the advice of my guru and things like that, the I claim Vasishtha as the Gotram. And that's just based on, so it isn't genetic, but it's the Gotram that I was adopted into under the Rishi. But so I take a lot of inspiration from the story of Satyakama in the Upanishads, and to where his birth was uncertain, and so with the whole idea of birth and things like that, I and my teachers are strong proponents of one's guna, one's innate qualities and character as being fundamental for adhikara versus birth per se. Not to say that there's no value in having a hereditary tradition. I don't mean to say that at all. But for people who feel inexplicably drawn to this, like myself and many other people, that there are factors that certainly can and perhaps should override birth or hereditary consideration.
Usually when there are thousands and thousands of students go to the US for higher studies, and their excuse to start eating meat is that the availability of time and resource. Give us some idea about how much veganism is growing in the US, and how easy is to resource the all these things to remain vegetarian, because it's really important.
Definitely. And within the 10 years that I've been practicing vegetarianism, the availability of options has grown so much. And it's so commonplace for most restaurants in my town will have options for you. And people are very aware, much more aware than before of what it is, the considerations and the benefits of it. More and more studies are coming out that are kind of praising the benefits, because there have been for a very long time sort of myths as well circulating surrounding, like, oh, you know, vegetarians or vegans, you know, they won't get enough proteins, they're getting incomplete amino chains and malnourishment and incomplete vitamins and things like that. And that's absolutely untrue. You know, to get a complete amino chain, you know, if you have like a balanced diet where you'll have lentils included, and you have, you know, the rice, and then you have, you know, a vegetable grouping, it's like, there you go, you have the complete nutritional stock of what you need. And actually there was a period of time, so because of this, people had been kind of hounding me to take multivitamins and stuff, and oh, you must be, you know, malnourished, or, you know, which wasn't true. But I took a multivitamin for a while, and the multivitamin caused problems. I ended up getting an iron overload because the multivitamins have like 100%, close to 100% of your daily requirement of iron. So when I had subsequent blood work done, every vitamin, every mineral, everything on a vegetarian diet, 100% dialed in, you know, no issues. So I think people are beginning to understand that more.
That's really very interesting, because I try to promote, and I do, as in vegetarianism in Kenya, because I really feel that it's a meat eating continent, and they have lots of disadvantages also in terms of money, in terms of health. So if you, I mean, I really wanted them to understand that, you know, one can feed more number of people for longer time if they remain vegetarian, or if they turn vegetarian. uh, like, I one more thing I want to understand is, when you study scriptures, what do you find scientific? As in, you know, today, nowadays, the whole idea is about science, and, you know, it has to be scientific. That word itself is very misleading. So you give me one or two examples which you think that science has discovered recently, and which you have found while studying your scriptures.
Absolutely. So Vedic rishis had a solar-centric model of our solar system long before, you know, our West, you know, long before like Copernicus, Galileo, and, you know, some of the people that we hold as the standards for people who have made these discoveries. These things were known about before then, and even now, you know, academia is catching on to beginning to understand this as well. Those are just, I'll say it. So the scientific method that's based on observation and experimentation and things like that, you definitely see the prototype of that through what the rishis themselves did. There was a higher emphasis on observation. And I think that it's something almost that there's some fields, I guess I should be careful in making a distinction between science and the conclusions that we come to that aren't necessarily scientific, but we believe them to be based on science. But the rishis were very careful about the conclusions that they came to, in a way that, you know, I feel like the way that certain studies and things are passed around today, and it's like, oh, this for sure means this one thing is happening. Then you'll have a different study over here that says something else, and it's completely contradictory, but one gets more publicity, and there, you know, there's a lot of politicking around it. Like it's a little less concrete and set in stone with the presentation of it than the actual processes. The rishis were very focused on the process. There's also not an antagonism between science and Sanatana Dharma in the same way that there was an antagonism between, say, science in Europe and the church, because the Hindu ethos is incredibly open to exploration, to new discovery. It isn't centered in sort of a historical narrative. It's centered on an ahistorical, eternal truth, but the particulars, the things that we can see and measure and study, those can say many different things. Those are very changeable. There's so many ways to explore that, but the truth, the underlying truth from which all of that springs, remains the same. And that isn't an object. So it's like, people are looking, where is Brahman? And it's like, well, Brahman is the entire prapancha. It is everything that is already. It is consciousness being the substrate of existence. These are things that are said in some of the oldest written works, and before they're written spoken works that are on earth, and they're things that are now beginning to be in sync with what modern physicists and things are beginning to say.
That is very true, but my always, this one particular question is always there, that why the Western world is not ready to cite any shloka or in any of the scriptures where these things are defined, like whether it is Newton's law, which we study in the scriptures, whether it is planets. Now, sir, it is very surprising that earlier they were ready to accept all 9 planets, and now they say there are only 8 planets. But we have been studying Navgraha, and Navgraha Puja we have been doing for thousands of years. So when, of course, we were doing puja because we knew that 9 planets are there. So that itself gives a very good example that, how our astrology and astronomy was so much merged into each other. So my last question to you is that I would like to share one thing which can inspire our listeners, that why they should follow Hindu way of life and vegetarianism, both very important. Maybe the last thing which you would like to share.
Definitely. So in my own path, what ended up happening was, I followed my own path, and it ended up resulting in Hindu Dharma. So I think that there's a lot of and particularly where I'm here, but I'm tempted to say that this is almost a universal thing, is particularly with my generation and things like that. There's this almost discomfort with, this idea of like, oh, I have to follow a religion, or that, and this is what someone else has said. And it's like, no, that isn't what Sanatana Dharma is saying, is that you have to follow it. It's just that there are very clear benefits, and the purpose isn't simply to follow, andha vishwasa. That's definitely not the purpose, but to explore these things for yourself. So if someone's finding themselves, like the whole of Sanatana Dharma, it's very much focused on the alleviation of suffering, and ultimately that's what moksha is freedom from suffering in this life, not only freedom from rebirth in a future life. But being that it's a universal human incentive to reduce their own suffering, and then the rishis having said, like, we have found this methodology that may be very, very useful to contributing to that. For me, that was something worthwhile exploring, and it was something that my own things that I found on the path, I had found out that other people had already found this very thing, and not only had they found this very thing, but they had explored it even deeper than I ever could have thought to. And so it's a succession of people who help a person on the path to doing that. And that's the purpose of the parampara, is other people helping you lift yourself up and you then turning around and doing the same. So I find constant value in the value that other people have found while doing that. And I think that that's something that's just going to continue to grow as I pursue it. And I think that that's something that a lot of people are coming around to sort of seeing and realizing and finding. So.
It sounds really very interesting and very inspiring. I think I had a very fruitful and inspiring conversation with you, because the purpose of inviting you was that your lifestyle, the way you have been living and what you want to pursue, and what path, the way you have taken from taking that initiation to the changing your name and the practices, is really important, because after all, that is what is the beginning of Hindu Dharma. Of course, attaining that moksha could be the last step of all these things, where not many people want to go, but then at least in practice, in everyday practice, which is so time sensitive, so much environment sensitive, animal sensitive. We are so much about taking care of every element of the universe. And I hope our audience will understand this, and get put some those things into their practice, because only listening doesn't help. If you don't if you have, like, if you are stuck in any of those things, that if, for example, if you are having meat every day, then give up meat slowly. If you don't know your ancestors, your gotra, your family lineage, then try to look for those things. If you have not been to any temple for a long time, go visit the temple, understand the shastra. If you're not reading any scriptures, then read any scriptures, whichever you like. You start small, you start slowly, but do it. So thank you, Keshavji. Thank you so much for having, for inspiring our audience. Namaste. Thank you.
Namaste ji. Hari Om.
Hari Om.